Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going straight into the engine room of the financial markets to break down the actual nitty-gritty operational mechanics of two major capital distribution events. We're talking dividends versus buybacks.
So, imagine a company you're invested in suddenly finds itself sitting on a massive pile of extra cash. How do they actually get it to you? On the surface, it seems like they've really got two main paths. They can either send a check to every single person who owns their stock, or they can put out a limited time offer to buy back your shares at a premium. I mean, both sound pretty great for us as investors, right? But behind the scenes, for the people actually operating the market's machinery, these two paths trigger completely different operational workflows. Section 1. The apple tree metaphor, understanding capital distribution.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really visualize the core difference here, let's just think of your investment as an apple tree. A dividend is basically the seasonal fruit. You keep ownership of the branch, and if you're holding it on the right date, you automatically get an apple. Simple. But a buyback, also known as an issue or tender offer, well, that's a proposition to buy the branch itself. You have to actively make a choice. Do you take the quick cash right now, or do you hold on to the branch, hoping the remaining tree yields a much higher valuation next year?
Section 2. Dividends, the automated marathon. Now, down in the financial engine room, a dividend is technically categorized as a benefit, and I want you to notice the definition here. It's a mandatory, universal distribution of a company's earnings directly to its position holders. So once the board of directors actually announces it, participation is universal. This isn't some opt-in scenario you have to sit around agonizing over. If you hold the stock, you are getting that cash automatically.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that because it's a completely automated benefit, the critical metric we track isn't a shareholder's choice. It's a specific date. Notice day 2 here, the ex-dividend date. You can kind of think of this as the cutoff line for a race. If you buy the stock even one single second before this date, which we see on day 1, you're buying Cum-Dividend. That basically means you're buying it with the dividend, which officially locks in your entitlement on day 3, the record date.
But what happens if you buy on or after that cutoff line? Well, you are buying ex-dividend, which literally translates to without. You bought the stock, sure, but the fruit stays with the previous owner. And this brings us to a huge takeaway for anyone investing. It completely explains why stock prices usually drop on the ex-dividend date. The market is incredibly efficient. It is literally subtracting the exact value of that apple from the price of the tree. It's an automatic valuation adjustment happening right there before your eyes.
Section 3. Buybacks, the choice.
All right, an issue or tender offer, or a buyback, is just a totally different beast from that automated marathon we just talked about. We actually categorize this as a voluntary event. The company isn't universally handing out cash to everyone. Instead, they're offering to repurchase their own issued capital. And notice the key distinction here. This requires you, the position holder, to make an active decision against a very strict deadline. It's an offer, and you actually have to engage with it.
Since it's voluntary, you actually have specific paths you can take. Step 1, you can just accept the offer and sell your shares back to the company, which is usually at a nice premium over the current market price. Step 2, you can take absolutely no action at all, meaning you just keep your shares. Or Step 3, partial acceptance. You sell some shares for some quick cash and keep the rest. Just think about your own portfolio for a second. If you held that branch on our apple tree, which route would you take when the gardener made an offer?
And this brilliantly illustrates the primary goal here, strategic capital management. Imagine a pie, where shareholder A and B each own 40% of the company, and the remaining 20% is just sitting there. If the company buys back that last 20% and retires those shares, the total pie literally shrinks. Now, if the company's future profits stay exactly the same, but those profits are suddenly being split among fewer total shares, well, shareholders A and B just got a proportionally bigger piece. Those remaining shares become inherently more valuable.
Section 4. Engine room risks, entitlement versus election management.
Let's actually compare the behind-the-scenes risks side by side. For a dividend, the risk is all about entitlement. The system has to perfectly track who owned what on the registrar's books. It's a high-volume automated marathon. If a trade somehow doesn't settle in time and the seller gets the cash by mistake, it's actually fixable. A market claim or compensation gets initiated, they get that money back and hand it to the rightful buyer. But contrast that with buybacks. The risk there is election management. Because it requires active choices from people, it's a high-pressure manual sprint. If there's a failure there, the result is an absolute, irretrievable missed issuer deadline.
Just to put the terror of that irretrievable missed deadline into perspective for a second, consider this number, 25%. Imagine a client explicitly asks to sell their shares back during an offer at $50, but the current market price is only $40. If the operations team misses that strict deadline to tender those shares, they can't just fix it later with a simple claim. A 25% profit was just lost into thin air. And in the financial industry, when a massive mistake like that happens, the firm itself might literally be forced to pay the difference out of pocket just to make the client whole. The operational stakes are, well, they're massive.
Section 5. Taxes and the verdict. Income versus capital gains.
So the absolutely crucial point here is how these payouts are actually classified by the taxman. With dividends, they are generally seen as income. And this is a huge deal because it often triggers a withholding tax. The government literally takes a cut before the cash even hits your account. A massive amount of time is spent dealing with double taxation treaties just to ensure investors aren't taxed twice on that same exact apple. Meanwhile, a buyback is classified as a disposal of an asset. That makes it a capital gains conversation. The investor is selling their investment, potentially for a profit, which is taxed completely differently than periodic income.
Which leads us to the ultimate strategic difference, summed up perfectly in our source material. A dividend is a way to keep shareholders happy with regular fruit, but it drains cash. A buyback is a way to restructure their DNA. Honestly, understanding these two totally distinct workflows is the only way to truly grasp how companies fulfill their promises to us, whether that's an automated check in the mail or a high-pressure, manual sprint to revamp the portfolio.
Which brings it all right back to you. We've seen how the engine room processes these massive distributions of capital and the totally different tax implications they trigger. So the very next time a company you own announces they have a pile of extra cash, ask yourself, as an investor, do you want the seasonal fruit or do you want to restructure the tree? It's a fascinating question to consider as you build out your own investment strategies. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.